So let me give you three numbers: 28, 99, and 150,000. Here's what those mean. $28.
Canada recently broke a world record in nuclear fusion. China did too, and Germany too, and France too. Not only this, President Trump's social media and tech firm, the company behind Truth Social, announced a merger with a nuclear fusion startup. And the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz thinks that Germany will have the first nuclear fusion power plant that'll make wind turbines redundant. Well, wow, it certainly seems like the race to nuclear fusion is in full swing now. Let's have a look at what the recent developments mean. The most explored technology for nuclear fusion uses tokamaks or stellarators or other ways to trap and heat the nuclear plasma with magnetic fields. This is called magnetic confinement. The next most common technology is to put the fuel in a target and shoot at it to make it fuse with lasers or particle beams or solid pellets. This is called inertia confinement, and then there are hybrid approaches that use both. The first new fusion record comes from a Canadian company called General Fusion. It's one of the few companies that work on a hybrid approach. They use magnetic fields to hold the plasma in a ring, similar to a tokamak, but on the outer side of the ring there's a layer of a molten metal which they then push in. This creates an extra pressure on the plasma, and that, so the idea, makes fusion easier. Now, what's the record? The record which was in the headlines was the number of neutrons per second that they produced, something like 600 million. Counting neutrons is a good way to quantify the nuclear fusion rate, and this is why this is an interesting number. However, if you look at the company website, that record is actually a year old. And also, it's a record only for this particular type of technology, which is pretty much only used by this company. Tokamaks have produced much higher neutron flows, so sustained nuclear fusion for a longer time than that. It's like setting a world record in a sport that you invented yourself last Tuesday. Let's then look at the next supposed record, the one from China. It comes from China's Experimental Advanced Superconducting Tokamak East for short. And the news is that they've managed to keep the plasma stable for a record duration at a very high density above the limit where these plasmas typically become unstable. They published their results in a paper that just appeared. This is meaningful progress which demonstrates that plasma control is getting really good, but no nuclei were fused in these experiments. The German record comes from the Wendelstein stellarator. That's a device similar to a tokamak, but with a much more complicated shape that makes it easier to keep the plasma stable. The record was for a quantity called the triple product. That's a product of temperature, density, and time for which they could keep the plasma stable. Alas, this too was the record for this particular device, and no fusion actually happened. The record from France now was indeed a world record for keeping the plasma stable, but again without nuclear fusion. So again, we can see that there is rapid progress in plasma control. Then there was Trump Media stock merger with TAA Technology, an American company. TAA Technologies also uses a hybrid approach to nuclear fusion. They create a ring of plasma and then shoot at it with a beam of hydrogen atoms to increase pressure and temperature and to create fusion. They have a prototype reactor and have demonstrated that fusion indeed happened. However, as with all current approaches, they are a long way from producing net power. Nevertheless, the share price of Trump Media and Technology Group jumped sharply on the news of the merger, also a sort of fusion reaction. Why would a media company merge with a nuclear fusion company? I don't know, but it isn't hard to guess. It's likely that Trump Media wants to branch out into AI-driven advances and hopes to one day power data centers with nuclear fusion. Many tech companies, including Microsoft and Google, have invested into nuclear fusion already for the same reason. By the way, you can find a written version of my science news at sciencewtg.substack.com. Finally, what's going on with the German Chancellor and his enthusiasm for nuclear fusion? Hard to tell, but I think it's to make Germans feel more optimistic about the future, now that most have understood it was a big mistake to phase out nuclear fission power prematurely. And you know what? I think Germany does have a fair chance of having the first nuclear fusion plant to produce net energy. Because if Germans are good at one thing, it's precision engineering. And if it doesn't work out, you'll get a 3,000-page report explaining why. In summary, yes, there is tangible progress here, especially for keeping the plasma stable. The remaining challenge is now to keep the funding stable. Science and maths can seem intimidating because there's just so much to learn. But don't despair, you can build your knowledge gradually and systematically with Brilliant, who've been sponsoring this video. Brilliant offers interactive courses on topics in science, computer science, and mathematics that let you build up your knowledge systematically to true mastery. The courses adapt to each learner's background, skill level, and pace, and they constantly add new content, like this course about digital circuits that explains how computers really work. They also have super useful courses on artificial intelligence and probability and chance. The courses on Brilliant are so well done, they really click into my brain. You can get started right now for free for 30 days. And of course, I have a special offer for viewers of this channel. If you use my link brilliant.org/Sabine or scan the QR code, you'll get 20% off the annual premium subscription. So go and check this out. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
Don't look up Moringa, seriously.